Hey guys, welcome to 6 Minutes for Friday, July 8th. We are talking Team Georgia and their trip to Fargo today. I'm Jason Fulmore, SE Russell. And before we get to Team Georgia, I wanted to make sure that we cover two things. First and foremost, and this is something I probably should have done at the very beginning of all of these. And if you're not following along, Team Georgia is actually the second to last state. But I think it might have helped, at least with some of the conversation I've had with some direct messages and stuff. And that is, this isn't a prediction. These aren't predictions. I'm not predicting who's going to make the podium, who's not going to make the podium, anything along those lines. Simply highlighting the team as a whole, the tournament as a whole, and a few kids that, based upon past accomplishments, you might want to keep an eye on for each of the teams. Look, as it relates to Team Georgia in today's conversation, Georgia's huge. They bring a lot of 16U men, a lot of junior men. They brought two teams to junior duels for girls. So there's a lot of names and a lot of people to talk about. And what I do is I typically use past results and things like that to highlight some of the names of people that we might want to pay attention to moving forward. But they're not predictions. I have no idea who is going to climb to the top of the podium or, who is not, who's going to make the podium. There's way too many variables as it relates to it. What bracket do you get? What weight class are you in? Who is the competition that you're facing? So on and so forth. So, the other part is that these are high school athletes. I mean, like all athletes, they're impacted by a number of different things, right? It could be how they went through, watching their weight, trying to get ready for the tournament. I mean, the number of variables are huge. So if I fail to mention a name or I highlight somebody and you're like, what? Why are you highlighting that person? I'm simply using and talking through some names that I might pay attention to. I'm going to try to pay attention to everyone, but I'm not going to spend 50 minutes doing a preview about the entire team. That's just not going to happen. So keep that in mind as we progress through the rest of the previews and as we, especially as we continue with Team Georgia. Here is the schedule for release, and by this point in time, honestly, Alabama, Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, they're all out, right? I only have Georgia today, Tennessee tomorrow. So I want to kind of push you towards next week. And as I am heading to Fargo, hopefully we'll be releasing the division previews. And the whole idea behind the division previews is for you to get a sense of those individuals who might be in each weight class, say 16U women, who might be the 144 pounders or the 180 pounders or so on and so forth. So that's based on rosters. That's based on names being submitted. Things change. I got a roster from a team a few days ago, and then what was posted on USA Wrestling was slightly different. So which roster is right? I don't know. What weight classes? I've already talked to several national team directors who've told me that some of the kids haven't exactly decided what weight they're going to go. So need to keep all this within, need to keep this in perspective because this is all an educated guess. But check out next week's. It should be really good. This is the schedule for the week in Fargo. And if you're not familiar with Fargo, we are talking 7 days of nonstop action. We have 16U women, junior women, Greco. We have 6 tournaments going on, okay, basically. And what's going to happen is that as one begins, another one will finish for the most part. So take a look at on Saturday, July 16th, the 16U women kick off, all right, in the morning. That afternoon, the 16U Freestyle for men kick off. Then on Sunday, in the morning, the Junior Freestyle men kick off. And at in the afternoon at about 1:32 o'clock is when we will see our first set of medal matches. And that's going to happen pretty much all week long, is we'll get a medal match round or medal round during that 1:32 o'clock time frame. Everything else shuts down, and they focus on those medal matches, those All-American matches. The first one up will be Sunday, July 17th with the 16U freestyle women. So, follow along. But if you want to watch the best, compete against the best, and you're just a fan of wrestling as a whole, you might want to tune in for 1:32 o'clock. Those are going to be the matches to watch. All right, so one of the things that I always get asked is, why Fargo? Why do I make a big deal about it? Why do I pay attention to it? So on and so forth. Well, I think that these numbers pretty much tell the story. And before I get into the numbers, I want to make sure that I highlight Jason Bryant, Matt Talk Online, who spent a long time putting together 194 pages of an almanac. It's at fargoalmanac.com. And he's been able to track kind of who these All-Americans have been and then where they've kind of progressed from that point forward. So as you can see, 79% of Division I place winners since 2006, they competed in Fargo. Didn't mean they made the podium in Fargo, but they competed in Fargo. 78.2% of Division I champions since 1994 did place in Fargo at 16U juniors. So nearly 80% of Division I All-Americans on the men's side placed in Fargo. It just gets you on the radar. And the same is for the women. We don't have as longitudinal of data for the women as we do for the men, because the tournaments haven't been around quite as long, and women's wrestling in college obviously is still growing by leaps and bounds and everything else. But these numbers hold true on that side as well. So your exposure to wrestling at the next level is huge. Not everybody wrestles at the next level. And if you don't plan to wrestle at the next level, Fargo may not matter at all. But if you do, this is certainly an opportunity to get on the radar. Now, we're going to get into the details of how deep the tournament is in terms of quality next week. But let's talk about simply quantity. Let's talk about simply numbers. And as you can see from the numbers that Jason Bryant has pulled as it relates to the last three Fargo tournaments, 2021, 2019, and 2018, you can see the numbers slowly rise over the 3 years. And if you go back further, they rise even more. And last year, for example, in freestyle, in junior freestyle, we had almost 1,600 athletes compete. So if you just take the number of brackets and you take that number and you divide it by the number of brackets that are available, each bracket had an average of 106 in junior freestyle. Now, if you're a smaller wrestler or a larger wrestler, those numbers might be smaller, okay? But certainly the 132s, the 138s, the 145s, 52s, so on and so forth, those brackets were huge. Well over 130 in the bracket. The battle to make the podium in some of these brackets is absolutely crazy, because just in terms of the number of matches, we're not even talking about the quality competition. The number of matches you have to win to be able to get to the point of being on the podium. All right, so that is the Fargo Almanac. I would check it out if you have a minute. It certainly gives you some context of past success, the states who have dominated, the states like Team Georgia. Team Georgia, in certain respects, has trended really well in some of these divisions. In some of the divisions, they haven't kept as pace with maybe some of the other divisions. So it's interesting to look at. All right, junior or 16U women, and we start there because that is where our tournament starts on Saturday morning. And as you can see, the 16U women, there have been 18 All-Americans from Georgia. Last one, was just last year, 2021. Genevieve Vaughn made the podium. Congratulations to Genevieve. She is back at 16Us and definitely one to watch. as we head in that direction. 16U women, there were 5 All-Americans in 2018. That's the most ever. I don't know that Georgia hits 5 this year, but there are definitely some names that you should want to keep an eye on as they compete, starting Saturday morning and finishing up on Sunday afternoon. There have been 2 champs for the 16U women, Haley Horton in 2014 and Amani Jones in 2019. Shout out to Amani Jones because Amani, she was a 16U champion for Team Georgia a couple years ago or a few years ago. And now, this weekend, coming up, she is wrestling for Team USA again in the Pan American Championships. So it's always nice to see kind of them progress and continue to make their mark after they leave these divisions. This is the roster for Team Georgia, and I've already made mention of Genevieve Vaughn. Another name that probably stands out is May Prado. May was in the hunt last year for a spot on the podium in 16U. Just missed out. I totally expect her to be back in the hunt again this year. And then we have a couple other names that could make a run. It will be really interesting. Jordan Epstein up top. From the information that I got from Team Georgia, she will be down at 94 pounds. And after going 4-4 at 100 pounds at junior duels, at 94, she stands an opportunity to make a mark. So, again, will she be able to push through? Jasmine Jenkins-Bay, Ariana Bacon. These are all wrestlers that it'll be really interesting to see how they perform once we get to Fargo. All right. Let's jump over to the 16U men. And the 16U men have had a really solid history as it relates to their performance in Fargo. They've had 53 Freestyle All-Americans, 61 Greco All-Americans, and they've had recent success, right? Gabe Arnold was a champ last year. There were 4 others that were that made the podium in 16U for Team Georgia, and all 4 of them, not Gabe, unfortunately, but all 4 of them, Drew Gorman, Hope-Po Hogan, Tyler Secoy, and Latrell Schaefer, now make that move from 16U to juniors. And we'll see how they do. We'll talk about them in a little bit. Greco side, we had 3 that made the podium, but our last champ from Team Georgia in 16U men was all the way back in 2006. The question is, will there be somebody who breaks through and is able to break that streak this year? So here's the roster for Team Georgia for 16U men. And as you can see from this, there's just so many names. There's so many wrestlers from Team Georgia that are going to go and compete. And our levels of past accomplishments in Fargo and leading up to Fargo are vast. They're huge in terms of kind of some past accomplishments and such. One of the things that I have a tendency to look at, especially with the cadets, because not many of the cadets, and I call them cadets still. It's now 16U by USA Wrestling, but is how they did in the cadet duels or the 16U duels a few weeks ago in Illinois. Because while not all of the top cadets go to those duels, many of them do. Many of them compete against one another, and it gives you a really good sense of how they measure up against one another in that kind of setting. Now, they don't always face one another, so we don't have that information, but we do have at least a good sense of kind of who to watch. And starting down there on the bottom right-hand side is Jacob Levy. He leads a contingent of really top quality heavyweights coming from Team Georgia, and I think Jacob was 7-1 at cadet duels. Only loss was the Samson Stillwell of Team Missouri. Otherwise, Jacob wrestled exceptionally well, as did Albert Butler, Trey Butler. Let's see, Brock Hacker was 5-3 as well. So those are all definitely heavier guys who wrestled well at cadet duels, who could make an impact in Fargo as well. As you look further down, and again, there's so many names, but Cade Parent, Emil Necula wrestled exceptionally well in the cadet duels. Noah Danforth, I think, was 5-3 as well. Jack Garrett wrestled well. Karen McCormick, Kilkuski down below. Nate Askew is somebody that you should pay attention to. Nate lost to Brock Mantanona 10-7 at the duels from California. Brock has got to be one of the favorites in the weight class, and that gives you a sense of how close Askew is to making an impact and climbing onto the podium as well. Probably the single name that you pay attention to the most that is on this list is Logan Paradise. That shouldn't put a target on his back or anything along those lines. Shouldn't raise those expectations too high. But Logan was 8-0 at cadet duels. He wrestles everywhere, competes against everyone. As I was looking towards next week, his bracket is pretty favorable. He's got some tough competition. Probably one of the single toughest 16Us in the field in Fargo sits in his weight class, and that's PJ Duke of New York. So that'll be something to pay attention to if he stays at 138. But fully expect Team Georgia to make a run. And there's going to be somebody on this list who I did not mention that I bet will make a run, whether they make the podium or not, winning 8 matches, winning 6, 7, 8 matches over 2 days, 3 days. It's going to be tough, but I definitely think that they have an opportunity. All right, so let's transition to the junior women. And, the junior women, to be fair, have struggled a little bit recently as compared to maybe some of the other divisions for Team Georgia. They have had 18 All-Americans, same as the 16U women. They had 3 in 2019, but they haven't had any since 2019. So, that's tough. The last champ was Kayla Morano in 2016, so 6 years ago. And yeah, that's, there are levels. Again, for those of you that don't know, there's a different level between 16U and juniors. And I've seen a lot of 16U All-Americans not place, not wrestle as well when they make that step up in competition. And, for these women, and we're going to flip over here to the roster now, you're going to notice some similar names again. You got Genevieve Vaughn and May Prado. Again, they were on the 16U roster, or they are on the 16U roster for Georgia. They're also on the junior women's roster, and they should be. I mean, it's an opportunity to wrestle in another competition, but making the podium in juniors is going to be a different task than making the podium in 16U. Not that they can't make the podium, but it's certainly something that you have to pay attention to. A few other names that kind of, again, stand out as far as on this list. Raven Cook is there. I'm not sure how Raven wrestled. Brooke French was 5-2 at junior duels. Raven Cook was 5-3. So those are definitely wrestlers that you want to keep in mind. And I think Callie Payton's back, and Callie, I believe, was here last year. So having that Fargo experience certainly should help a great deal for her and her ability to be competitive and trying to make the podium as well. All right, let's shift to our final group, and that is our junior men. And as you can see, the junior men, just like the 16U men, have not only been very successful, but have had some really good recent success. 53 Freestyle All-Americans, 56 Greco All-Americans. They had 4 last year, including champ Caleb Henson, who won it at 152. They had 2 Greco All-Americans in 2021, but their last champ wasn't recent. Andrew Webb back in 2015. One of the things that's always interesting is the depth that goes with the junior men. And as you can see here, even in really good years, when Georgia has had some super strong squads, they've never had a top 5 finish. And in 50 years, they've only had 2 top 10 finishes. So this is This is deep. The junior men are a deep division, and it's a lot of fun to watch. So, who should we be paying attention to for the junior men? And look at this list. There are tons of names, and I don't even know where to start because there are so many names on this list of people that really could make a run, depending on their bracket, who they face, and so on and so forth. I'll start with the 4 that were 16U All-Americans a year ago. Drew Gorman is wrestling freestyle only, I believe, at 126. Latrell Schaefer, Tyler Secoy, and Hope Hogan. Those 4, they were here last year, 16Us. They made a run to the podium, to make the podium a year ago. Certainly ones to watch, and certainly we'll talk about them next week when we break down the divisions and the junior men. Other junior men to pay attention to. So if we go to the junior duels and how they wrestled at junior duels, Alan Calderon was 4-5. One person that I think that you should pay a lot of attention to is Colin Mullins. Colin Mullins was 8-1. His only loss was to Grayson Clark of Wisconsin, and he's certainly somebody that, in probably the deepest weight class in juniors. So I don't know if how he'll fare against. I mean, we are talking just lights out 132. I think it's 132 in juniors is super stacked. We'll talk about it next week, but we are talking about a fantastic weight class. Colin proved that he has the ability to go and compete with anybody. He's 8-1, so we'll see how he fares. Another person down on that list, Amari Alvarez, was also 8-1 at, and this is in freestyle, 8-1 at the junior duels. Certainly another one to watch, but also another one that's making that leap from 16U up to juniors and competing in juniors for the first time. So definitely another one to watch as we continue on. Luke Cochran and Matthew Waddell, Charles Higdon. There's a lot of others names on these lists. Dominic Didomaso is back. I believe he's only wrestling Greco at 126. It'll be great to see him compete in Greco. He always wrestles super well, and see him go out and give a run there as well. And then the last name I want to touch on is Jeremy Paradise, because like Dominic, Jeremy is a graduated senior, back to make a run for the podium, and he is he's competed everywhere. And I mean, I think he was in the running at World Team Trials in Greco, so he's definitely going to be in the hunt there. But same thing. In freestyle, he's just as talented and should make a run and be very competitive there as well. Look, it's so hard, and it's what I said at the very top of this conversation, and it's at the very top of this. It is hard to pick out how well they will do in Fargo because the brackets are so deep. You don't know who's going to get who's going to bounce back, those sorts of things if they get beat early, who's going to battle their way through. It is a grind. Some of the names I threw out, they've had some past experience. They've had some past accomplishments, and they have been competitive and making a run for the podium. But I also want to make sure that I point out, I don't think anyone on this list was on the podium as a junior a year ago. I could be wrong with Jeremy, but as I look down the list, there's a lot of 16Us on there, but there aren't any that I believe that were on the junior podium a year ago. So, keep that in mind. A lot of expectations for Team Georgia. They will be super competitive. How many they walk around, how many coasters, stop signs, so on and so forth that they walk away with, it's hard to know. But I fully expect Team Georgia and many of these individuals to be right there in the hunt, competing for a spot on that podium. First, safe travels to everyone as they head to Fargo next week, and best of luck. I'll be watching you guys. I hope we pull in a ton of coasters. a ton of medals and bring them all back to Georgia and have a lot of success. So wishing you guys good luck. I'll see you in Fargo next week. See ya.